Welcome back to Smart Money on CNBC-TV18. We're here talking about social media influence on the mutual fund industry, and we have Radhika Gupta here with us to tell us about the pros and cons of social media's influence on the industry and on your investments rather. Radhika, now let's talk about the mutual fund distributors, right?
Yeah.
Why is it important for mutual fund distributors to expand their social media footprint, particularly among the millennial and Gen Z investors? You were telling me that 60% of Gen Z consumes largely social media, right? I mean, I'm sure the number is much higher than that. But tell us a little bit about what the approach should be from a mutual fund distributor point of view.
So I think there are two things mutual fund distributors should think about. One is that if you look at a mutual fund distributor, they are very credible people. They are largely, they've been people who've spent time in the industry. They're qualified to give advice. So at a point when we're worried about uncredible, unscrupulous sources out there on social media giving advice, I always tell them, well, they're giving advice because you're not, and we need more credible people. Social media is a reality, it's not going away. So we might as well have more credible people like mutual fund distributors giving that advice. And by the way, giving that advice not just in English, but in all kinds of vernacular languages, because our mutual fund distributors are spread across the entire country, and that's where they can really connect. So it's a great distribution platform. We need credible people. The second is for mutual fund distributors. I think if you think as a business, it's an important source of potential brand building and customer acquisition. These are finally small independent businesses that are looking for reach and looking for customers. I think it's a great way. So the confluence of what is good for the distributor and what is good for the ecosystem. And we are seeing cases, individual cases of mutual fund distributors doing this extremely well.
Okay, so since we've established that all the eyeballs are now moving to social media, let's try and understand what is the type of content that influencers are focusing on in the finance and investment space. And for someone who perhaps gets all their information from social media, what are the do's and don'ts?
Yeah. I think in terms of, both short form and long form content seem to have become very popular. If you look at platforms like Instagram and YouTube, shorts seem to be the most popular things. Reels, short form content seem to be very popular. Data-driven content on stocks, on specific industries, deep data, simplified and packaged in a nice way seems to work very well. On a platform like YouTube, longer duration content, deep investment insights, that kind of stuff also exists, and people are grading their content. So even with us, we're grading content. Some content is for beginners and some content is for more evolved audience, because with finance, you really have a wide spectrum of audience that you're catering to. Again, I think my point is that as a consumer, you should be careful of the kind of content you're consuming. You should be making sure you're verifying content found online with a real source, because a lot of claims made online may not be true. And you should, again, I repeat, not fall for clickbait content, because there's a lot of clickbait out there. So there'll be a lot of content just recommending a fund, for instance, on the basis of 1 year performance. That can't be the only basis for you making a decision. Go verify that fund. Is 1 year performance the right metric, which I think it's not? Study the fund outside. Contact a financial advisor. Just because you've seen a tip in a video, don't go make a financial decision.
Okay, and SEBI is doing a very good job in kind of making sure, not just clamping down on influencers, but making sure that the right kind of advice is being put out. And there are some, guardrails in place for the industry, right? As you post a lot of content yourself on social media's different platforms, what kind of content helps you to engage with audiences, and what tips would you give someone out there who maybe wants to start a career in putting out financial content, but sharing content responsibly on social media?
Yeah, so I think responsibility is an important part of content. I think consistency is an important part of creating content. So, content creation is work and it takes time. So consistency is an important part. Simplifying content for me has been the number one thing. So we don't often realize how complicated financial jargon can be. And taking the content and saying, so what does it mean to an investor? How can a consumer use this fund? So forget flexi cap versus multi-cap, active versus passive. How do I take some financial concept or product and use it in my day-to-day life? How do I solve a particular problem? So simplification and consumer focus, I think, is winning content. For instance, every time I have a conversation about how to invest for your child, it seems to be very popular because it's a problem that all of us are grappling with. So to content creators, I think in anyone who's looking to use social media, look at the problems that people are grappling with and try to answer them with your content in very, very simple terms. That seems to work. Authenticity, sharing your own stories works really well.
So, today someone asked me on social media itself, what are the genuine online credible sources for mutual fund scheme selections?
Yeah.
So, I thought I'll pose this question to you because I'm sure you get this question a lot as well.
So, of course, individual AMC websites have factual data. Sometimes they have data that you don't find in other places. I'll give you a simple example. Most places and reports post trailing performance. It's not the best metric to mention performance. The best metric to measure performance is something called rolling performance. AMC websites actually have a host of that information. I mean, I know our website for each product has that literature. Please check it out. There are good quality aggregators. Value Research is one, but there are many others that aggregate mutual fund data, in a reasonably reliable way.
So what is the difference? I mean, for someone who's watching, what is the exact difference between a trailing performance and a rolling performance?
So trailing performance, trailing 1 year return is the return of the investor that invested exactly 1 year ago to now. For you as a consumer who's investing, actually that number is not relevant because it reflects nothing on your experience over the next 1 year or 3 years. Rolling 1 year performance is the return of every consumer who invested in that fund for any 1 year period. What is more relevant for you as a consumer? The average of many, many different consumers or of one consumer?
That's very, very helpful. Yeah.
And if there's one statistic I look at when looking at fund performance, it's for an equity fund, it's the rolling 3 and 5 year performance of that equity fund. And I need nothing else to make a decision. When is it high? What's the maximum? What's the minimum? What's the average? It tells me everything about the fund.
So on an average, what should the rolling performance be of any fund? Now, if I've invested in a fund and I check the rolling performance, then what is good and what is not so good?
So typically check two things. I mean, an equity fund, a large cap equity fund should have about 12-13% rolling year returns. You can check how that compares to the benchmark in that same period. So if the fund is doing 2-3% over the benchmark in a 5 year period, that's pretty good.
That's good enough.
That's good.
Okay, so that's very, very helpful. Coming back to our subject at hand, anything that you'd want to leave our viewers with on the kind of statistics that you're seeing in the mutual fund industry, purely courtesy what you've seen with the social media growth in the recent past?
I think in terms of statistics, as I mentioned, influencers are rising in number, social media penetration going up, and my only quest to viewers is, do use social media because there's a lot of good content that is being posted out there. A lot of people, a lot of women investors come to us for simplification of content. If you follow the right authentic people, there's actually very valuable content out there. Topical content, for instance, a lot of clarifications like issues like KYC, etc. You get great clarifications on social media. So to that extent, it's already being used reasonably effectively.
Okay, well, Radhika, this was very, very helpful. Thank you so much for joining us. Just before we let you go, right? I mean, this has been a great year for you. You've done so much, not just with your business at Edelweiss. You've been on Shark Tank. You've grown your personal brand. You've done so much at Amphi as well. What does the next couple of years look like for you?
I have no idea, but my focus continues to be on growing Edelweiss AMC into a very loved brand, and I think we've made some headway there on trying to communicate with as many investors at large and spreading sensible financial awareness. I think that's the second part. I've written a book, maybe I'll do something else in that space, but I like engaging in content and helping people. And I'm a mom to a 2-year-old.
Oh, absolutely. That's the best part of your job,
right? That's the best part of my job.
The best part of what you do. Okay, just before we wind down, 2 years ago, you wouldn't have had as much social media exposure yourself. I'm talking about your personal brand. What has your learning been through it all since you've grown this brand, not just Edelweiss, but your own personal brand? And what would your advice be to several businesses who are trying to get reach, distribution? Do you think personal branding is the way to go?
I don't have an answer to that. I think social media is powerful. I think in a lot of corporate worlds, we're scared of social media. We're very reluctant. And I'm saying if you want to play that game, don't play it reluctantly because that reluctance will show in your content. It requires a certain tonality. It requires a certain commitment. So don't do it.
Confidence.
Yeah, it requires a certain confidence. So either don't do it or do it whole hog. I also, when I talk to a lot of corporate professionals like myself, they're very scared of the trolling on social media. And what I say is that trolling is a reality. If you're putting yourself or your brand out there in public, you will get a lot of noise. You have to learn to tune out the noise, and you have to know why you're doing what you're doing. So I know why I'm doing what I'm doing. I know the influence it has for me, for the brand. So I know why I'm doing what I'm doing. And then you let the trolling go. But don't do it reluctantly.
Okay, you have to tune out the noise, right? Not just on social media, but
in
life
markets
in general.
also.
In the markets and in life in general,
life in
right?
general.
Life is too short to worry about other people's opinions.
Correct.
All right, Radhika, always great speaking to you. Thank you so much for joining us on Smart Money.
Thank you. Happy weekend.
Okay, and to all of you joining in, please write to us. We love receiving feedback from you. Till we meet again, happy weekend.